Welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. I'm your host Caleb. Today we are talking about Sorell. JUND is so back, specifically JUND Landfall. And this isn't your boring landfall commander. This guy is super unique. He's 5 CMC. He allows you to play land cards from your graveyard. Additionally, he says whenever you sacrifice a non-token permanent, you're going to put a 1/1 counter on another target creature equal to Szarel's power. So all we have to do is get this guy to a 5/5. Cast something like Scape Shift, sacrifice 4 of our lands, search up 4 sacrifice lands or fetch lands, sack all of them, get more lands on the battlefield, and that's a total of 8 permanents being sacrificed. You guessed it. Now we have a 40 power creature. We can sacrifice that, and depending on the creature we sacrifice, that can just kill the entire table. So this isn't going to be your average ordinary landfall deck, and if you want to see some suggestions I got for building this deck, stay tuned because that's what we're talking about today. Go ahead and click on that whatnot link to claim your free $15, and for all of your proxy needs, Tolarian Library Proxies will give you 10% off whenever you use code DT4D. Additionally, liking, commenting, and subscribing helps me out a ton. To show my appreciation, I will be replying to all the comments in the comment section down below. Now let's get into these deck tech suggestions. One more thing I wanted to mention, if you guys get this video to 500 likes, I will go ahead and build a Precon version of the commander before the actual Precon comes out. So we're talking about somewhere between $65, $45 commander fleshed out. The deck will just work and you won't have to upgrade it. It's just going to work out of the box. Going to be a solid budget Precon. Now we can get into the suggestions. The first thing we're going to want to do here is make our commander a little bit bigger. Retreat to Khazan Dune and Roaring Earth are perfect here because they trigger whenever a land enters the battlefield, and they allow you to put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. Bristly Bill and Scyther Cat Cub also work amazingly here, especially the Scythe Cat Cub. It says whenever a land you control enters, put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. If this is the second time this ability has triggered this turn, you can double the number of counters on that creature instead. So this is going to quickly get you a very big commander, but also this card is super expensive because of how good it is, right? Bristly Bill, kind of the same pricing, kind of does the same thing. Allows you to put a 1/1 counter whenever a land enters the battlefield, and then has an ability to pay 5 and double the number of 1/1 counters on each creature you control. I'm also a fan of Mezzarek here. Mezzarek does two things, right? We want to put 1/1 counters on our creatures, and additionally, we want to make our commander bigger. This guy says whenever a player sacrifices another permanent, put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. So now it's triggering all of the creatures we want to get bigger, and additionally it's making our commander bigger. So this guy does two things since he hits the entire board. But I love the cheap little landfall effects. I think those are going to be our best bet here. The next thing I want to talk about is the ways we can just bring a ton of lands back. The thing we want to do here is sacrifice the majority of our lands and then just bring them all back with something like an Aftermath Analysis. You sacrifice him and then return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. Lumra works very similarly. It's a 6 CMC bear that says Vigilance, Reach, Lumra of the Bellows, power and toughness is equal to the number of lands you control. And then when Lumra enters, mill 4 cards, then return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So what you do is you sacrifice all of your lands, dump all of your counters on the best creature you have on the battlefield, and then bring all of your lands back onto the battlefield. We also want to be generating value whenever we're sacrificing these lands. Nahiri's Lithoforming is X into red and says sacrifice X lands. For each land, sacrifice this way, draw a card. You may play X additional lands this turn. Lands you control enter the battlefield tapped this turn. You can also play cards that allow you to have lands enter untapped, which is pretty cool, or cards that allow you to untap your lands whenever they do enter tapped. So that way you can kind of cheat that, and it's kind of like ramping and you're drawing a ton of cards and triggering your commander a ton. There's a lot of ways to abuse this. Squandered Resources is a black and a green, and it says sacrifice a land, add to your mana pool 1 mana of any type that sacrificed land could produce. Play this ability as a mana source. So now you're sacrificing your lands to add mana to your mana pool, and then we're playing them all back from the graveyard, or we're just using our Lumra effects to bring them all back from the graveyard. Amazing. Tatiana, Protector of Argoth, doesn't sacrifice lands, but she says whenever a land you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you get to create a 5/3 green elemental creature token. So this girl generates a massive board state very quickly. And then we have the GOAT Zoran Orb, 0 CMC to cast, and it says sacrifice a land, you gain 2 life. Remember, these effects are very powerful because our commander has you may play lands from your graveyard tacked onto him. So he's going to enable this strategy very easily, and then you're just able to sacrifice a land for free and play it from your graveyard very consistently. This means we want to be playing cards that allow us to play additional lands each turn. That way, every single turn we're able to sacrifice X amount of lands, and we know for sure we're going to get to play those lands because, again, our commander is just allowing us to play them from the graveyard. Azusa's Lost But Seeking allows us to play 2 additional land cards, and she's 3 CMC. We have Dryad of Illusion Grove, Exploration. We even have the new loot. There is no shortage of effects that allow us to play additional land cards from our graveyard. I mean, just on this list alone, I was able to find 9. The Gitrog monster is also amazing here. This guy's 5 CMC and says at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice the Gitrog monster unless you sacrifice a land. You may play an additional land on each of your turns, and it also says whenever one or more land cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere, you get to draw a card. So now you're getting card advantage whenever you're sacking your lands, and you get a way to consistently play additional lands. This guy's going to be amazing in the deck. Sometimes he feels a little awkward in decks because the Gitrog monster, sacrificing lands, you just kind of end up in a weird place where you're sacrificing lands, drawing cards, but you're getting less and less mana out of it. But this is going to be the perfect deck for this guy. He's not going to feel awkward at all unless they remove your commander. Then, you know, the deck's not going to work very well. Another thing that's going to be very powerful here is our Lotus Cobra effects. We have Lotus Cobra, Nissa's Resurgent Animus, and even Tireless Provisioner. These are cards that allow us to generate mana whenever a land card enters the battlefield. I love pairing this with Springheart Nantuko. You can bestow this onto a creature, and then it says whenever and then it has a landfall abilities. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you can pay 1 and a green if Springheart Nantuko is attached to a creature you control. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that creature. If you didn't create a token this way, create a 1/1 green insect creature token. So essentially, you're going to be doubling up on whatever this is equipped to. This means if we have it equipped to our Lotus Cobra effects, we play a land, we pay an additional mana because we generate a mana off the Lotus Cobra, and now we have 2 Lotus Cobras. The next time we play a land, it pays for itself. And then the next time we pay for or a land enters the battlefield, it not only pays for itself, but we end up a mana. So once you get 3 of these Lotus Cobra effects, you just start netting mana, and it just feels super broken every time you get this synergy off. There's also some pretty funny infinite combo stuff we can do with this guy using Evolutionary Witness. I know this card's not hard to break, but this guy also breaks it. Evolutionary Witness has Adapt to and says whenever 1 or more 1/1 counters are put on Evolutionary Witness, return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. All we need to utilize here is something like a Lotus Petal or a Lion's Eye Diamond, basically just an artifact that's 0 CMC that generates mana and sacrifices itself. Then you cast the Lotus Petal, you sacrifice the Lotus Petal for, let's say, 1 green, your commander triggers, puts a 1/1 counter on Evolutionary Witness, and then Evolutionary Witness brings back Lotus Petal to your hand. Then, after you generate infinite mana, and Evolutionary Witness has infinite power at this point, you can just slam a Walking Ballista for infinite damage and kill the entire table. Again, there's a lot of other stuff you can do here. You can draw your deck with Greater Good. There's no shortage of win lines here, especially when Evolutionary Witness is allowing you to return a permanent card from your graveyard. As long as you have the payoff in your graveyard, Evolutionary Witness can also just grab that. Super powerful here, but you know, this card's not hard to break. Let's talk about the fun stuff. What are we trying to put all of these counters on, right? There's a lot of options in JUND, honestly. Burrogoyf is going to be amazing. This guy's 3 CMC. He has Death Touch. He has Lifelink. He also says his power is equal to the number of cards among all card types in graveyards, and his toughness is equal to that +1. He also says whenever Burrogoyf deals combat damage to a player, you may mill that many cards. If you do, return a creature card from among them to your hand. So that's really powerful. We're just able to mill cards equal to his power, and this is going to be a deck that wants as many cards in its graveyard as possible. Crystalline Crawler is a 4 CMC artifact creature. This card just ends up being more and more broken than I think it is. It has Convergence, which means it enters the battlefield with a 1/1 counter on it for each color spent to cast it, and then you can remove a 1/1 counter from Crystalline Crawler to add mana of any color to your mana pool. He also taps to put a 1/1 counter on him. So as long as your commander is like something like 5 power, a land enters the battlefield, we sacrifice it, We put 5 counters on Crystalline Crawler, and we just gained 5 mana. Again, this card's just going to be really broken in this deck. Flaming Tyrannosaurus is going to be a win con in this deck if you want to go, let's put a lot of counters on a creature, sacrifice it, and kill the entire table route. This guy has Menace, and whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, he's going to deal 3 damage to any target, then you get to put a 1/1 counter on him. Notably pretty good because this deck can utilize 6 and other cards to cast cards from our graveyard. He also says when Flaming Tyrannosaurus dies, he deals damage equal to his power to each opponent. So in the scenario where we're getting 40 power and shoving it on a creature, shove it on this guy, sacrifice him, you kill the entire table. Gruff triplets are also kind of going to be insane in this deck. It's 6 CMC, 3 green, and 3 generic. Trample. When Gruff Triplets enters the battlefield, if it isn't a token, create 2 tokens that are copies of it. When Gruff Triplets dies, put a number of 1/1 counters equal to its power on each creature you control named Gruff Triplets. So in a scenario where we're casting this again and again from our graveyard, putting counters on it and sacrificing it, we're getting an increasingly larger board of Gruff Triplets every time we do that, right? Because you end up with 2, 4, 6 Gruff Triplets, and then every time we're sacrificing the original copy, they're all getting bigger. Another solid way you can end out the game, not as explosive as the Tyrannosaurus, but also it's a little bit more fun and takes a little bit more setup. You can really do whatever you want with this deck. He's pretty powerful. Indoraptor is one of my favorite cards. It's 3 CMC, it's 1 generic, a black or green, and then a red. He has Bloodthirst X. This creature enters the battlefield with X 1/1 counters on it, where X is the damage dealt to your opponents this turn. He also has Menace, and he has this cool little ability. Whenever the Indoraptor is dealt damage, choose an opponent at random. Indoraptor deals damage equal to its power to that player unless they sacrifice a non-token creature. So in a scenario where we just get rid of all the creatures on the board, we can ping this guy with something like a Walking Ballista and kill the entire table that way. Again, the world is your oyster here. The O here, specifically the red one, he has Trample. If a red source you control would deal an amount of non-combat damage to a creature, you deal damage equal to his power instead. This is really cool here because there's a lot of red creatures that allow you to deal 1 damage whenever a land enters the battlefield. So now instead of dealing 1 damage whenever a land enters the battlefield, you're going to deal 10, 20. So you can kill an entire table pretty fast with this guy if you have the right build around. Like I said, I don't think you put all of these in the deck, but I think you choose the route you want to go and then you hone in on that and just go that route. Kami of Whispered Hopes, also amazing, 3 CMC. If 1 counter would be put on a permanent you control, that many +1 is put on it instead. So now you're able to kind of get additional counters, especially with your landfall triggers. Those creatures that say whenever a land enters the battlefield, you got to put a 1/1 counter on a creature. Now you're putting 2 1/1 counters on that creature instead. So it's effectively doubling it up, which is very powerful. And then you can tap it and add X mana of any color to your mana pool where X is his power. So just stock up a whole bunch of 1/1 counters on him and he's going to tap for a ton of mana. The next one I want to talk about, this one's definitely build specific because I think this is a deck that really wants to utilize a lot of fetch lands, but Rampant Rejuvenator is 4 CMC. He enters the battlefield with 2 counters on him and says, whenever this creature dies, search your library for up to X basic land cards where X is this creature's power, put them onto the battlefield, then shuffle. I think this could be very powerful if you're also on a card, Root Path Purifier. It's 4 CMC and it says lands you control and land cards lands you control and land cards in your library are basic. So now it basically just says grab all of your non-basic lands and put them onto the battlefield, which can be very powerful. Another niche card I think we could run here is Orcish Lumberjack. I can't talk right now. This guy's 1 red CMC. You can sacrifice a forest, add 3 mana of any combinations of red or green to your mana pool. This is just going to really help us ramp out our commander. Our commander is 5 CMC, but playing this guy turn 1, we could look at a turn 3 commander and then we're off to the races and we're able to cast those land cards from our graveyard. And also we're able to tap Orcish Lumberjack every single turn to generate 3 more mana. So again, this deck can be very explosive. Speaking of explosive, 100% we're putting core Corvold in this deck. This guy says whenever you sacrifice a permanent, put a 1/1 counter on Corvold and then draw a card. So now we're getting insane card advantage. I think this can be a very, very fun landfall deck that looks very different than your traditional landfall decks. I don't think you want to run a ton of landfall payoffs. I think you just want a lot of ways to benefit off of a creature getting a lot of 1/1 counters put on it. So let me know if you guys want this deck tech out. I am going to do a Precon version, and then we'll wait till the full set gets released, and then I'll build the commander out. But again, 500 likes, you guys are getting a Precon version. It's going to be between $65 and $45, and it's just going to flat out work. With that being said, guys, I hope this helped you in your deck building endeavors, and I'll see you guys in the next one.